Okay, looks like we've got quite a few folks here. So I'll ask Benny to go ahead and kick us off with the presentation. Let me introduce myself. My name is David Holsinger. I'm the Acting Director and Associate Dean for the Cloud Computing and Network Engineering programs. You'll see that we have both programs now in the same session. We used to be separate, but the department has combined, so we have everybody working under one roof now. I've typically been responsible for cloud in the past, and Benny has been in charge of networking. So let Benny introduce himself, and then we'll kick things off with the presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dave. I am Benny Vargas. I am the lead academic program manager for our network engineering and security program. We're excited to have you for our open house breakout session. And as Dave mentioned, we will be presenting on our Bachelor of Science in Cloud Computing and Network Engineering and Security. So to get us started, when you look at what a cloud and network engineer does, often the roles do a lot of the same things, and that's designing, configuring, and maintaining the network infrastructures that companies rely on. Beyond that, they are responsible for ensuring security and compliance in those networks. They monitor for network performance, and when the need arises, they troubleshoot and resolve issues. Some of the skills that you would acquire at WGU that are essential for either a role in networking or cloud is skills such as network design and infrastructure, security and firewalls, automation, including AI, networking such as LAN, WAN, and SD-WAN, deployment of networks, and monitoring and troubleshooting. For cloud, you'll often be tasked with working on networks such as hybrid and multi-cloud. You'll be doing virtualization, orchestration, cloud architecture, along with identity and access management, and storage and database services. About our programs, there is a great deal of overlap between the two. So just because you select networking, it doesn't mean you won't be working on some things that you see under the cloud skills. Likewise, if you select cloud, you'll be learning some of the skills that you see under networking as well. Now I'll let Dave speak more on our cloud computing programs.
Yeah, thanks, Benny. So our Bachelor of Science in Cloud Computing features 3 tracks. We have what we call a multi-cloud track, which gives you some experience on both the Azure platform and on AWS. And then we have tracks specific to AWS or Azure that have more specialized certifications on each of those platforms. But they all do include at least some level of cross-training. So even if you take the AWS track, you'll at least do Azure fundamentals. With Azure, you'll do the Amazon Certified Cloud Practitioner, for example. So you're familiar at least with the technologies and could potentially switch from one to the other at some point if you wanted to choose to do so. Our current enrollment is about close to 3,800 students. We've been growing quite a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. Another highlight of the program is those tracks include either 11 or 12 embedded certifications. So that's a mix of some of the basic certifications from CompTIA, Network Plus, Security Plus, Cloud Plus, for example, as well as then the AWS and Azure specific certifications. I believe there are 4 for each, and it depends on which track you follow, which ones you'll get. So as I mentioned, we do have those certifications. The AWS and Azure tracks have some specific micro-credentials. So these reflect the focus on the platform. These become shareable. So it's something that you could actually point an employer to that lists out not just the certifications that you have, but covers also some of the specific skills and courses that you've covered. So it gives you something a little above and beyond just getting those certifications. That's something you can add to a LinkedIn profile, for example. Makes a nice addition to your resume, almost as a portfolio. So we have those in DevOps and security for those tracks. We talked a little bit about skills in the program, covering sort of what is there in a little more detail. all of the programs, both cloud and networking, contain some core IT courses. So that's stuff like networking. You'll get the CompTIA Net Plus, some database management courses, Linux. There's a Linux certification that you get, as well as scripting in PowerShell and Python. Once we move on to the cloud-specific courses, there's stuff on security, architecture, infrastructure as code, and like I said, no matter which track you take, you'll get the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner and Azure Fundamentals. And then as you move on to the platform-specific courses, Azure Developer Associate is in 2 tracks, AWS Cloud Developer is just to the AWS track, and then AWS Cloud Architect is on 2 tracks, and Azure DevOps Solution is just on the Azure track. So Benny, you can move on to the next one. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Now we'll be looking at our network engineering and security program offerings. And there's 2 tracks that you can choose from. One is vendor neutral. The other is focused on Cisco technologies. We've reduced the credits for graduation in these programs from 120, which is the standard, to 111. There's a focus on virtualized hands-on learning and assessments so that you're not just reading text, but you're often having to show that you can do exactly what it is that you're trying to learn how to master. Then there's a current enrollment currently of 3,753. So both programs have almost an equal amount of students. And there's a 47% military affiliation student count within the network engineering and security program, which is the highest at our School of Technology and the university as a whole. As far as embedded certifications within the program, there's 8 to 11 based on which program you choose. 8 within Cisco that include certifications we'll see on the next slide, 11 in our vendor neutral. And these allow you to essentially progress in your career as you advance toward your degree. One exciting thing about our program, it was recognized as the 2nd best online IT systems and security program in the country. Now, in terms of the certifications, if you are looking at our general track, you have the A+, the LPI, the ITIL, Cloud Plus, Net Plus, Sec Plus, along with 3 more stackable CompTIA certs. And if you're looking at our Cisco option, you have the A+, the LPI, the ITIL, Cloud Plus, and then you have the Cisco specializations such as CCNA, their cybersecurity certification, and their DevNet certification. Now we'll look at career outlook. David.
All right, thanks, Benny. So what you see here is sort of a progression of career paths for both cloud and network specialists. One of the common first steps into a career after graduating would be a network tech. And we've pulled all these salaries from national averages, so it may be higher or lower in specific parts of the country, but this is an average. Often you'll progress from network tech, or maybe you'll even start as a system or net administrator. Eventually, say 2 to 5 years out, you'll move into a network engineer or cloud engineer role. With more experience, you may be working on hybrid networks or hybrid cloud operations. The top levels that you would end up at are a network or cloud architect as an individual contributor in an organization, or if you end up in leadership, you might end up as a chief network architect or a chief cloud officer in an organization. And we've noted here, we've taken statistics from an internal database we use called Lightcast, as well as things like Glassdoor. The demand for all of these is estimated as high and continuing to be high over the next 5 years. I'll talk a little bit about what you get out of your degree at WGU. So we use a calculation that we call factored graduate return, and that measures basically what you've spent on your degree versus the value you'll get over the course of your career, right? So we look at, based on incoming salaries of students into our programs, and then the positions that our students get both immediately after graduation as well as 5 years out, what would you expect your salary increase to be over your remaining working years divided by the cost of your education? I'll note that our average terms to graduate is about 6. Most of you will bring in some transfer credits that let you graduate quite a bit sooner than the standard 4 years. And we know we have a lot of students who would even accelerate through the program. Like, I think you're familiar with, you're allowed to progress through as many courses as you can within a given 6-month term. There's no limit on that. And we have some graduates who finish very quickly, based on prior experience. But what we've calculated your factored graduate return to be is as much as 40 times your investment. So looking at the salaries for non-degreed IT jobs, which some of you may be coming in with, the national average for that is around $53,000. If you look at jobs that require a BS degree, that jumps to $81,000. And then if you look at jobs that require a BS and about 5 years of experience, again, you're looking at a leap of almost $30,000. So, if we look at an average age of graduation of 35, which is roughly the average across the university and definitely in our departments, you can look at 30 plus working years divided by the cost of your education here, which is going to be about $8,000 a year, but check me on the public website as to what that is currently. It averages out to as much as 40 times what you've spent on your degree.
Okay, and now we're going to look at some of the reasons that we've heard from students as to why they chose WGU. One of the main things is direct career relevance. It was the most common factor in a survey that we did of our students that indicated they chose the program because it aligned with what their existing careers and their desired career paths were focused on. And they understood the importance of network engineering and cloud computing and found that the coursework was directly applicable to their professional goals. A second reason is certification focus. Students value that we have in-demand industry certifications embedded within the degree, and they see it as a significant benefit, allowing them to gain both a degree and valuable credentials as they progress through their studies. The third reason was practical interest. Many students just expressed a genuine interest in the program concepts and how they apply to real world scenarios. So they wanted to build expertise in this fundamental area of IT. Now, a couple of the things that you may have already learned in the beginning of today's open house is WGU's model for self-paced learning. It appeals to students specifically because oftentimes our students are juggling work and other commitments, so they appreciate the flexibility and the ability to accelerate their studies. Lastly is reputation and recommendations, and this is just positive word of mouth, which plays a huge role in why students select WGU. It was frequently mentioned that recommendations from people within their field who were satisfied with the programs at WGU led them to enroll in WGU as well. I'm sure some of you that are joining us today, you heard about us from somebody else that might have been a former student, so that's something we take great pride in. Now, before we get to questions, we will be sending out a quick poll. We'd be happy if you guys answered that so that we understand what your interest was for joining us in today's breakout session. But other than that, I will open up the floor to any questions you may want to submit via the chat. We have Tawanda Finley, who's one of our program mentors, along with Dave and myself here to answer those for you.
The poll may be in a separate tab next to the chat if you haven't seen it yet. I'm not exactly sure how it appears to those of you who are just attending, but for us, it's a tab next to chat. I do see quite a few of you asking, what if I could combine the two programs? And that's feedback that we're getting more and more from students. So we're looking at options for that in the future. Like I said, we're combining under one roof. The two programs are now part of the same department. So we're looking at what we can do, right? And we're always evolving the skills and certifications and so on that we have in the program. You may see that evolve and change over the time that you're at WGU. We're constantly keeping up with demands in the job market. So as we see, specific certifications maybe ebb or gain currency in the market. We're always looking at changes there. How can a student utilize career development or job opportunities within WGU? So, we mentioned the fact that we have these certifications kind of layered throughout the program, and most terms in both the networking and cloud programs have at least one new certification, if not two. So what you might be able to do, for example, once you've gotten past Net Plus and you've added Security Plus, you might be looking at within your organization, could I move into a more of a security analyst role or start working with security projects in addition to my networking technician role that I might have, right? Or you might start at help desk and take on more networking and cloud responsibilities, right? You might move up from tier 1 to tier 2 support. How do we all make sure that the program is keeping up with the fast pace of changing technology? That is something that we're constantly looking at. We have a group within WGU called Skills Architecture, and they are constantly looking at job postings, doing research. We have an advisory board of folks in technology. It ranges from CEOs to government folks, for example, working at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to make sure that they're constantly giving us input into things that we should be adding or removing from courses. And we do change courses relatively often. You'll see that happen over your time at WGU, that we may update the content or swap out a course. It's something that we keep looking at all the time.
Great question.
There are questions in the Q&A tab. Oh, sorry about that. What's the realistic outcome for people looking at getting a job in the FANG companies after a degree from WGU, specifically cloud? So I know we have currently some students who are working in AWS, starting off mostly in support tech roles. With those certifications, if you're looking specifically at the AWS track, again, they're good for getting you in the door, definitely at AWS in the support levels, and then moving, forward as you get experience within the company into more of the network and cloud engineer roles. I have someone who started in data analytics, but is also interested in AWS. I know that data analytics program has added more content specifically around cloud. They do include the certified cloud practitioner cert. They now have an ML ops course, specifically deploying machine learning models and things like that. So that's probably of interest to you. It really depends. I did want to mention one change that we've had in the program. Specifically, Microsoft has phased out the Azure Data Engineer certification. We're looking at a replacement for that. So kind of, pick where your interest is more. I mean, the cloud program is much more about building and deploying infrastructure. The data analytics program is more math and analytics focused and works a lot with data presentations and things like that. So it's really, picking where your interests are. As a recently unemployed software engineer, can the cloud MS help me land a remote job as a cloud engineer? So we don't actually have an MS program in cloud. This is only an undergraduate program. But yes, we have seen students successfully land jobs, with companies in cloud roles. What I'd like to mention is, it's not just the big tech companies that students find jobs in. Cloud is really important to a lot of areas. We see a lot of students go into retail, logistics. I mean, if you think about, transit and shipping companies, if you think about, somebody like Target or Walmart, who has national huge operations with a lot of distributed stores and workers and so on, all of those companies, are heavily focused on migrating their internal applications to the cloud now. So there's a lot of opportunity, in any of the big Fortune 500 companies that have a distributed workforce. Is it possible to transfer credits into the cybersecurity program once you graduate the network engineering program? Yes. We don't have a direct bridge program like some of our undergrad programs do into cybersecurity, but there are a number of courses that will transfer in for credit if you decide to go for the master's in cybersecurity.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Dave. So to the person that asked that question, while there are some credits that you could transfer into a bachelor's in cyber, our recommendation would be get your bachelor's in cloud or networking, then take the master's in cybersecurity because of the courses and let me not say the courses, because of the certifications that you obtain in the cloud or networking program, that will reduce the number of credit units or courses that you need to take to get your master's in cybersecurity. And based on discussions we've had, somebody that has a degree in cloud or networking and then gets a master's in cybersecurity has a much broader set of skills that are very applicable to their careers and to advancing within their fields. So that would be a very smart path.
Yep. Question about the enrollment statistics for the cloud program. We have about, I think I mentioned on an earlier slide, around 3,800 students. I would say more than half of those are in the multi-cloud track. The AWS track is around 25%, and then the Azure track is around 15 to 20% off the top of my head. There's a question there from an international student about English competencies. Unfortunately, that's one I can't answer directly. I'd advise you to talk to your enrollment counselor about how the English requirement gets handled. We do also have some students going through our WGU Academy for an intro term now. And I think English composition might be one of the courses that's available there. And it's a pretty substantially reduced cost. So talk to your enrollment counselor potentially about that option. That might be a way to get that satisfied as well. How are the remote job opportunities for cloud computing? I think I mentioned throughout, cloud computing and network engineering are some of the best opportunities for remote work. We talk about supporting large, for example, retail organizations is one I always go to, but healthcare is another one, where companies do tend to have very distributed operations. And because of that, people tend to not be tied to one specific location. And a lot of those companies have been more progressive in allowing people to work remotely. Final question. Are you able to walk away with a degree having absolutely no experience in IT? The answer to that is yes. We start off, if you come in with no transfer credits and no IT experience, we go through an introduction to IT. We include the CompTIA A+ certification, which is an intro to hardware, software, and then work you up through the networking technologies, through additional IT skills, project management, things like that. So you'll end up pretty well-rounded, and then can choose to add specific cloud skills on top of that in your degree program. Question, I've never done coding before. Do I need experience in Python to be successful? We have we have a couple of courses around scripting and programming. I mentioned we do have a PowerShell course, and we have a Linux that give you some initial experience into shell scripting. And then we have one course in Python that's required to graduate. The one in networking and cloud is much more practically focused. So it's going to show you things like, how do I work with log files, for example? How do I pull data out of a CSV file that might be tracking some application's performance? So it's much more geared towards that rather than the kind of computer sciencey aspect of Python. You won't be thinking about algorithms and data structures quite as much. Much more job oriented for folks in cloud and networking.
Yeah, the specific focus on that is Python for IT automation.
Right. Looking for any other questions I didn't get to in the Q&A. I think, do instructors have regular virtual office hours for discussions, questions throughout the degree, or is communication mainly through email? Instructors are happy to set up calls with you. They'll work through text, email, whatever works best for you. If you're working late at night, you maybe do most of your communication with instructors by email, but they're happy to text you when you're off work, or whatever works ultimately.
And Tawanda might be able to help with that. Tawanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the instructors have like self-schedule meetings that you can kind of pick from for a convenient time to connect with them. Thank you.
Great. Question there, would it be better to just learn AWS instead of multi? That is really open to you, I would say, and you don't have to make a decision until you're fairly far along in your studies. I guess it depends on how many transfer credits you bring in, but we have a standard path of courses, and you don't really have to choose to specialize until about term 5, I think. So you can be here for a year or two before you even have to make that decision. It's relatively easy to program change from one to the other. If you're not sure that you want to go into AWS or working, for example, for an employer now who uses AWS or Azure, it might be better to stick with the multi-cloud program because you do get exposure to both. So I would think about, do you have specific job needs now that might suit better? Or are you just trying to cast a wider net as you're looking for jobs once you graduate? Question there on M365 administration. We don't have any courses that deal with it directly. There's a lot of stuff about Azure AD and some of the more advanced Azure courses, but I don't believe we have anything specifically on Microsoft 365. Question, what is better for long-term career goals, pay, et cetera, doing the multi or specializing in AWS or Azure? I hope I kind of answered that. So again, it depends on whether you're focusing specifically or casting a wide net, right? AWS does have more market share at this point, but Azure has a good foothold with bigger companies, and they're also in the government, especially in the Department of Defense. So those of you who might be coming in with a security clearance for military service, for example, might benefit more from Azure-oriented work. So honestly, there are great opportunities in both. Tech startups tend to rely more on AWS. If that's appealing to you, you might want to go that route. So I can't really say specifically one way or the other. It really depends on what you're looking at as a career path. Somebody to have access to Udemy, are they implying that it's a paid resource through WGU when I use Udemy for Net Plus and CCNA, but I had to pay? So we incorporate Udemy content into some of our courses, meaning you'll get specific lessons and content from Udemy as part of one of your WGU courses. So that I don't believe it's in Net Plus. We're mostly using CompTIA's platform for that now. But there are definitely other courses where we brought in some of their lectures, labs, activities, and so on, at least as supplemental materials. But it doesn't give you a straight out subscription to Udemy to go out and take unlimited courses there. Any other questions? We're getting close to the top of the hour.
Well, we had a lot of great questions. For those of you that are looking to learn more about WGU, we welcome you to check out our program pages on the website. We are thrilled that you were able to join us today, and we look forward to having you as WGU students, preferably in our cloud computing or network engineering and security programs. So on behalf of Dave and Tawanda, thank you all very much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.